Today I'm going to talk about landscape conservation cooperatives, particularly the one here in Florida. The idea is pretty simple. It's people working together to get better sustainable results and to design functional landscapes that will last into the future. I'll give you a little history in terms of conservation in the U.S. Conservation started back right after the turn of the century. Teddy Roosevelt and others, Gifford Pinchot, got together and said, our wildlife resources are going to heck. They're disappearing, so we need to do something about it. And they worked pretty diligently and developed some federal programs, Nichol Johnson and Pittman Robertson, that basically provided funding and to train biologists and to fund conservation programs with the idea of restoring sport, fish, and wildlife. And I want to tell you that those programs have been hugely successful. There have been a lot of critters that have been extinct by now, probably, if we had not intervened at that point in time. But the original focus was on single species: bison, white-tailed deer, ducks, things like that. Then along came, with state fish and wildlife agencies, place-based management. That would be state fish and wildlife, agency wildlife areas. It could be national wildlife refuges, national forests, and looking at management in those individual places. And then slightly thereafter came management of species guilds, waterfowl councils and flyways and things like joint ventures that got together to say, these animals occur over a continental expanse, so we need to work together in terms of providing habitat all up and down that flyway. And out of the JVs came this idea of LCCs, that if we can do this for birds and for waterfowl on that kind of scale, why not all fish, all wildlife, and use a partnership type approach? So that's kind of the new paradigm now in conservation moving forward. Budgets are being cut, both at the state level and federal levels. We're learning that we need to work together. Since the 1970s, we've had a pretty good run in terms of resources. When I started with the old GFC, the entire agency was 322 people. And right now it's 1,900 full-time employees. So just to give you an idea of scope and scale of growth in that period of time. What happened, though, unfortunately, was with a lot of cash out there, there was a lot of competition for those resources, and people build their own programs. Sometimes they appear to be duplicative. Well, now we need to say, we need to stop that and say we need to collaborate now and work together. Who's a good partner? Who can do this better than anybody else in the world? Rather than trying to develop your own products, your own expertise. The LCCs also are driven by the fact that we're looking at stressors that occur on a landscape level that we've never seen before. Things like extractive uses of water that impact in-stream flows and wetlands, exotic species, climate change. There's a lot of things going on out there that far transcend the ability of any one agency to deal with it. And they're, like I said, they're at a landscape level. These complex challenges also are going to require a lot of expertise. I've dealt a lot in the last 2 years with climate scientists, ecological modelers, people who are doing forecasting. Fish and wildlife work has not done that up to right now. In the past, we've basically done our studies. Our studies have been retrospective. They're looking backwards over our shoulder. But now we have to say, what's it going to look like in 10 years from now or 20 years from now? What do these stressors look like, and what can we do now to get a better outcome? Also, the idea behind the LCCs is that not everybody has to join the LCC, but be a member or a partner. So all groups that are already out there, all conservation initiatives can participate, and they can participate at different scales and scopes, and in different arenas too. The LCCs also are not going to be a new entity or new organization. It's basically partner organizations that have to, at the end of the day, go home and operate under their authorities and responsibilities to get conservation done. What the LCCs can do is to develop a common vision of science needs and management problems so we can start working together and work collaboratively. Lastly, we think that the LCCs can help eliminate some duplication of effort and improve conservation planning and design. I think that here in Florida we have a rich history of conservation work, But I do believe that we drive by each other every day up and down the interstates going to our place to do our thing and are blissfully unaware of others' efforts. I was at a meeting not too long ago of aquatic scientists. It was on the Chipola River in the panhandle of Florida, and found out that two different federal agencies, one state agency, are all working on the same reach of that river and did not know it. So at the end of that day, we had a new collaboration going on. Said, well, next time you go out, can you get this sample? And when I go out, I'll get that other sample for you. The program is about 4 years old now. Florida LCC is about 2 years old. It was kind of a staged development. There's 22 LCCs. Some are very big. Some are a little smaller, like California and Florida, because of the species endemism and kind of unique characteristics. So it's from Puerto Rico all the way to the Hawaiian Islands to Alaska, so a big geography. And I found out one interesting thing. When we have our meeting of these 22 coordinators, a central location is Denver, Colorado. And having spent almost 38 years here in Florida, I thought Ocala was the center of of the universe. So in Florida, the political geography of Florida actually includes 3 LCCs: Florida, the South Atlantic, and the Gulf Coastal Plains and Ozarks. The reason that these geographies were picked for bird conservation regions, which is something the service had worked on for a number of years, some ecological divides, and also some drainage basins. But they're not perfect. I mean, that little line there across Florida, things don't change that fast across that line. So we're working in concert here in Florida with our partners in the South Atlantic and the Gulf Coastal Plains to get more seamless network of information, because a lot of the information we have here in Florida, it can be exported to the other LCCs. I'll give you an example. U.S. Forest Service has three national forests in Florida, and guess what? One in each of those LCCs. So they would have to show up in 3 different places at 3 different times. But I said, well, look, I live in Tallahassee, and that's where the headquarters for National Forest of Florida are. How about if I coordinate for you, and I'll help communicate back? So that's how we're starting to kind of get more communication and trying to get better collaboration. Like I said, Florida was a prime candidate for an LCC. We have a rich history of conservation design and planning going back almost 20 years. Part of that was due to the fact that Florida's had a very aggressive land buying program in 27 out of the last 30 years, where $300 million a year was bonded to buy public conservation lands. And along the way, the legislature said, okay, you've been buying land now for a number of years, how much more and where? And so we actually started doing some conservation design work in terms of trying to identify what the important areas were for fish, wildlife, water, ecological connections, a bunch of other things. So that project was called CLIP, Critical Lands and Waters Identification Project. And the graphic on the left are priorities 1, 2, and 3 for conservation. And it goes all the way through priority 5. So you can see that people have been thinking about how we connect up these landscapes across Florida to allow for animals to move back and forth, large animals like black bears and panthers to move around on that landscape. And possibly in the face of climate change, we probably want to have some connectivity there so that the animals can react and adapt. And I think animals are a lot more adaptable than we give them credit for. Some probably aren't because they have very narrow ecological niches, and so those we may have to help a little bit. But so that was one of the tools we have. We also have a project called Cooperative Conservation Blueprint, and that's where local communities are coming together. You have local politicians, elected officials, agency representatives, NGOs to say, what does a sustainable Southwest Florida look like? What does a sustainable Central Highlands Ridge look like? And including things like working landscapes. And they're going to be very important for transitional habitats and connectivity. Florida also has a state wildlife action plan. All 50 states have this, and it's identified threats and stressors. And so part of the job of the LCCs are to take these existing tools and start to add them up. Here in Florida, we can simply adopt this document if the partners agree. We just finished a 5-year revision to incorporate climate change stressors. And starting this year, with the help of a postdoc, we'll be looking at setting conservation targets. And those are things that are endpoints that we want to monitor against to make sure that we're not losing things along the way. And they're going to be a combination of biological, ecological, and social phenomena. To me, a conservation endpoint would be maintaining sustainable reef fisheries. That's a very human-centric type of a metric. But underneath that, there's a lot to do with coral biology and fish sizes and fish species and size distributions that maybe people don't care so much about that kind of really dry science, but they care about that kind of outcome. So hopefully we'll be kicking that off this fall. And we've got, as I said, we have a steering committee. It's 22 members. We have private landowners, a number of federal agencies, the Miccosukee Tribe, several landowner organizations, including the Farm Bureau, the Forest Association, and this is the vision they came up with. And they want to be functional and connected ecosystems valued by citizens. So it has to matter to somebody. So it has to matter to you folks too, what we're doing out there. And to make sure that we connect up, because things that happen in Georgia affect Florida. What things happen in Alabama affect Florida, and we're all kind of connected at some scale. And there's a term I learned that I never heard of. It came from the aquatic community. They call it white water to blue water. That everything's connected from the very highest mountain streams to way out in the Gulf of Mexico. It's all one system, and so I think it's a catchy phrase that kind of portrays that idea. Okay, they did hire me 2 years ago, much to their chagrin. We've got some governance documents. This is all kind of dry stuff. We've just finished a strategic plan for a 5-year period to help guide the partnership in terms of the science we need, how do we identify management needs. And so we're going to continue to do partnership outreach. I do quite a few talks across the state. Sometimes I come home with a new steering committee member, sometimes not, but just kind of getting the word out what this is. And this is kind of the idea. We have a steering committee, but we're going to put together some working teams underneath that. So that's where all the agencies and NGOs can start working together and contributing their resources to work together. We do have a networking hub. It's open access. If you want to look at it, you can join it. You have to put your name in there. We found out that having these open access websites, you get some strange stuff in there that they're not people. And then you end up getting emails that you don't want to get, from Ivana or Yvette or somebody like that. So we just try to verify what your interest is, but you can go on there. We're going to try to load that up with a lot of information and meetings of interest and some of our findings. So it's still in the design phase right now, but hopefully I can get a communication specialist on board in the next few months to take that thing on. That's kind of what it looks like. It's pretty easy to navigate. It's got pretty good functionality. You and I can figure it out. This is just some of the logos of some of the partnerships we have out there already. We're partnering with the Atlantic Coast Joint Venture, SARP, that's Southeast Aquatic Resource Partnerships. So we're really kind of reach out and try to get all the bird groups, the waterfowl groups, the fish groups, the aquatic folks to work together and come together. And to me, people say, why the LCC? Is this another new fad? And I said, I don't think so, because I think the contributions of all the partners will add up to something much greater than their individual accomplishments, all by themselves. So with that, that's my last slide, and I appreciate being here this morning.